I was sitting on my back porch in Scottsdale, Arizona, watching the sun dip behind the McDowell Mountains when I heard the unmistakable sound of my storage shed being opened without my permission. The metal hinges squealed in that particular way that told me someone was messing with my stuff, and I jumped up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. By the time I rounded the corner of my house, I saw her. Patricia Hendricks, the HOA president of our Sunset Ridge community, was walking away from my property with my brand new generator extension cord coiled over her shoulder like she owned the damn thing. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice carrying across the desert landscaping that separated our properties. "That's mine." Patricia turned around slowly, her perfectly styled blonde bob not moving an inch despite the evening breeze. She was wearing one of those pastel cardigan sets that screamed middle management and entitlement, paired with white capris that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. Her face arranged itself into that expression I had come to know too well over the past 2 years since moving into this neighborhood. Part condescension, part fake concern, all infuriating. "Oh, Stephen," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I was just confiscating this per HOA Regulation 7.3. You cannot have generator equipment visible from the street or stored in non-approved containers." "That cord was inside my shed," I said, walking closer but keeping my distance. I had learned that much about dealing with Patricia. Never get too close, never give her ammunition to claim you were threatening her. "My locked shed, on my property. How is that visible from the street?" She clutched the cord tighter, her knuckles going white. "The shed itself is visible, and therefore anything inside it falls under HOA purview. I sent you 3 notices about this. You sent me notices about my shed door needing to be painted the correct shade of desert tan, nothing about what I keep inside it, and definitely nothing that gave you permission to break into my private property and steal my belongings." "It's not stealing when it's enforcement," Patricia said primly. "And I didn't break in. The lock was already open." That was a blatant lie. I had checked that lock myself this morning before heading to my job at the aerospace engineering firm downtown. The lock had been secure, a heavy-duty master lock that I had specifically purchased after Patricia's last campaign of harassment 3 months ago, when she tried to fine me for having my trash cans out 4 minutes past the designated pickup time. "Patricia, that's my property. I bought that cord 2 weeks ago from Home Depot for $350. It's a heavy-duty 50-foot cord rated for my backup generator. I need it for monsoon season." "Then you should have stored it in accordance with HOA guidelines," she said, already turning away. "You can retrieve it once you've filed the proper storage approval forms and had your shed inspected and brought up to code. I estimate that should take about 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the board's schedule." I stood there, hands clenched at my sides, watching her walk away with my property. This was the same woman who had tried to fine me $500 for parking my work truck in my own driveway overnight because it had company logos on it. The same woman who had sent me a violation notice because one of my desert willow trees grew 3 inches taller than the approved height limit. The same woman who had called code enforcement on my neighbor for having a garden gnome that was apparently too whimsical for the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. But this time, Patricia had made a mistake. She did not know that I had learned my lesson after the last few run-ins with her arbitrary enforcement of rules that seemed to apply only to people she did not like. This time, I had taken precautions. That generator cord had a registered serial number, and I had documentation of everything. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. The first was to my buddy Marcus, who worked in security consulting. The second was to my neighbor Bill Thompson, who had his own war stories about Patricia and had been documenting her behavior for months. The third was to the Scottsdale Police Department's non-emergency line, because whether Patricia realized it or not, she had just committed theft. The next morning came with the kind of crystal-clear Arizona sky that made you understand why people moved to the desert. I had barely slept, spending most of the night organizing my documentation and preparing for what I knew was going to be a battle. At 7 in the morning sharp, I was sitting at my kitchen table with copies of my purchase receipt, the serial number registration form I had filed with the manufacturer, photographs of my locked shed from that very morning before Patricia's theft, and a detailed timeline of every interaction I had had with Patricia Hendricks over the past 2 years. My doorbell rang at 7:30. I opened it to find Officer Jessica Martinez standing on my porch, her uniform crisp despite the heat that was already building. She was young but had sharp eyes that took in everything, from my neat appearance to the folder of documents I was holding. "Mr. Stevens," she asked, "I'm here about the theft report you filed last night." "Stephen Norris, yes. Thank you for coming, Officer Martinez. Please come in." I led her to my kitchen table and laid out everything methodically. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in a small notebook, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I showed her the photographs of my shed with the intact lock timestamped from yesterday morning, she nodded slowly. "And you're certain Miss Hendricks took the cord?" I saw her walking away with it. I confronted her immediately. She claimed she was confiscating it for HOA violations, but she admitted to entering my locked shed without permission. "That's breaking and entering along with theft," Officer Martinez said. "Regardless of HOA authority, which is civil anyway, no HOA has the right to break into someone's private property and take their belongings without a court order." That's what I thought. She keeps acting like being HOA president gives her some kind of police power. Officer Martinez's expression suggested she had dealt with overzealous HOA board members before. "Do you have the serial number for this cord?" I handed her the registration document. "It's a specialty contractor grade cord. The manufacturer, Power Link Industrial, registers all serial numbers at point of sale for warranty purposes. That's the serial number, and here's my receipt showing I purchased it on May 3rd at the Home Depot on Scottsdale Road. They'll have security footage if needed." She photographed all the documents with her phone, then handed them back to me. "I'm going to go have a conversation with Miss Hendricks. I'll need you to stay here in case I have follow-up questions." "Of course." 45 minutes later, Officer Martinez was back at my door, this time with Patricia Hendricks in tow. Patricia's face was red, whether from anger or embarrassment I could not tell. She was clutching my generator cord like a lifeline, her knuckles white around the bright orange rubber casing. "Miss Hendricks has agreed to return your property," Officer Martinez said formally. "However, I need you to verify that this is indeed your cord by confirming the serial number." I took the cord from Patricia's reluctant hands and checked the metal tag near the plug end. The serial number matched my documentation perfectly. "This is my cord. Serial number PL 88472294HG. Officer Martinez made a note. "Mr. Norris, do you wish to press charges for theft and breaking and entering?" I looked at Patricia. Her eyes were blazing with fury, but underneath I could see something else. Fear, maybe, or the realization that she had finally pushed too far. Part of me wanted to press charges immediately to make her face consequences for 2 years of harassment and petty tyranny. But another part of me, the part that had to live in this neighborhood and deal with this woman potentially for years to come, hesitated. "I want my property back, and I want assurance this won't happen again," I said slowly. Patricia, you broke into my shed and stole something worth over $300. That's not HOA enforcement. That's a crime. Officer Martinez, I need some time to think about pressing charges. What are my options? You have up to a year to decide whether to pursue criminal charges for theft of this value, Officer Martinez said. However, I would recommend documenting everything and considering a restraining order if this pattern of harassment continues. Miss Hendricks, I'm giving you an official warning. If Mr. Norris files a formal complaint, you will be arrested and charged. Do you understand? Patricia's voice came out strangled. This is ridiculous. I was performing my duties as HOA president. I have the authority to enforce neighborhood standards. You have the authority to issue fines and violations through proper HOA procedures, Officer Martinez said firmly. You do not have the authority to enter someone's private property without permission or remove their belongings. That's not civil enforcement, that's criminal activity. If you believe someone is violating HOA rules, you follow your organization's bylaws and legal procedures. You do not take matters into your own hands. Am I making myself clear, Crystal? Patricia bit out. After Officer Martinez left, I thought the situation was resolved. I had my cord back. Patricia had been officially warned, and I had documentation of everything. I should have known better. Patricia Hendricks was not the type of woman to accept defeat gracefully, and I had just humiliated her in front of a police officer. She was going to retaliate. The only question was how and when. The answer came 3 days later in the form of a certified letter from the HOA's lawyer. I signed for it on my lunch break, sitting in my truck in the parking lot of my workplace, and read through 12 pages of dense legal language that boiled down to one thing. Patricia was suing me for harassment, defamation, and creating a hostile living environment. She was also filing for an emergency HOA hearing to have me fined $15,000 for multiple violations that she claimed I had been committing for months. I read through the list of alleged violations with growing disbelief. My shed was the wrong color. Never mind that it was the exact color specified in the HOA documents. My landscaping was not drought compliant, despite the fact that I had xeriscaping done by a licensed professional specifically to meet water conservation requirements. My vehicle was parked illegally, even though it was in my own driveway on my own property. My outdoor lighting was too bright. My mailbox was mounted at the incorrect height. My house numbers were the wrong font. It went on and on. A laundry list of complaints that were either completely fabricated or so petty that they barely qualified as violations at all. But the kicker was the final accusation. According to Patricia's filing, I had threatened her during the incident with Officer Martinez, causing her emotional distress and making her fear for her safety in her own neighborhood. That was an outright lie, and we both knew it. Officer Martinez had been present for the entire interaction and had documented everything. But Patricia was betting that I would not want to go through the hassle of fighting both a civil suit and an HOA hearing. She was betting that I would just give up, maybe move away, and she could go back to ruling Sunset Ridge like her personal fiefdom. She had badly miscalculated. I called my insurance company first. My homeowner's policy included legal protection for HOA disputes, something I had specifically added after the first few run-ins with Patricia. Then, I called Bill Thompson, who connected me with 3 other neighbors who had been keeping their own documentation of Patricia's behavior. By the end of the day, I had a lawyer, a strategy, and a growing sense that this was going to get a lot bigger than a stolen generator cord. The emergency HOA hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday evening at 7 p.m. in the community center. I spent the intervening days gathering evidence, talking to neighbors, and working with my lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca Singh, who specialized in HOA disputes and had a reputation for not backing down from bullies. "Here's the situation," Rebecca told me during our prep meeting 2 days before the hearing. "Patricia has overplayed her hand badly. She's filed frivolous complaints, documented false statements, and committed actual theft. But she's also been HOA president for 6 years and has a lot of social capital in this community. We need to not only defend you but also expose her pattern of behavior. That means we need other witnesses. I have 4 neighbors willing to testify about their own experiences with Patricia," I said. "Bill Thompson had her try to fine him $3,000 for having solar panels. Sharon Mitchell got a violation notice because her daughter's birthday party decorations were visible through a window. Tom Chen was threatened with a lien on his house because his garage door opener was broken and the door was open for 2 days while he waited for repair parts." Rebecca nodded, taking notes. "Good. That establishes a pattern. What about the board itself? Who else is on it?" "There are 5 board members total. Patricia is president. Then there's Frank Morrison, the vice president. He's generally pretty reasonable but usually defers to Patricia. Carol Jensen is the treasurer, and she's been getting increasingly frustrated with Patricia's spending of HOA funds on legal fees for these petty disputes. David Park is the secretary, and he's basically checked out. And Jennifer Walsh is the at-large member. She's new, only been on the board for 6 months. So we potentially have 2 board members who might be sympathetic and 3 who are either in Patricia's pocket or not engaged enough to push back. That's actually not bad. We need to make this so egregious that even Frank can't defend it." "How do we do that?" Rebecca smiled, and it was not a particularly nice smile. "We let Patricia bury herself. She's going to present her list of violations and try to paint you as a problem resident. We're going to systematically debunk every single claim with documentation and evidence. Then we're going to present testimony from other residents about her pattern of harassment. And then we're going to raise the question of whether she used HOA funds to pursue her personal vendetta against you, which would be a breach of her fiduciary duty. Can we prove that? Carol Jensen, your treasurer, is already concerned about it. I spoke with her yesterday. She's been noticing irregularities in how Patricia handles the legal budget. With her testimony and the financial records, we can make a very strong case." The night of the hearing arrived with temperatures still in the 90s even after sunset. The community center was packed with residents, far more than usually attended these meetings. Word had spread about the confrontation, and people were choosing sides. Some were there to support Patricia, believing her version that I was a troublemaking resident who refused to follow rules. But a surprising number were there to support me, people who had their own grievances with Patricia's authoritarian approach to neighborhood management. I sat at a table facing the board's raised platform with Rebecca beside me. Patricia sat at the opposite end of the board table, looking confident and composed. She had dressed for the occasion in a severe black suit that made her look like she was presiding over a corporate board meeting rather than a neighborhood association hearing. Frank Morrison called the meeting to order and read through the standard opening procedures. Then he turned to Patricia. "Madam President, you called this emergency hearing. Please present your case." Patricia stood, holding a thick binder that she placed on the podium with a theatrical thump. "Thank you, Frank. I've called this hearing because we have a resident who has consistently and deliberately violated our community standards, who has harassed and threatened me personally, and who has created a hostile environment for everyone in Sunset Ridge. Stephen Norris has shown a pattern of contempt for our rules and our community. She began going through her list of violations, projecting photographs on the screen behind her. But as she spoke, I could see Rebecca making notes, occasionally showing me something and getting my confirmation. Every single photograph was taken from public streets or sidewalks, but many of them were doctored or taken from misleading angles to make minor issues look worse than they were. When Patricia finally finished, nearly 30 minutes later, Frank turned to me. "Mr. Norris, you have the right to respond to these allegations." Rebecca stood. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I'm Rebecca Singh, representing Mr. Norris in this matter. We will address each allegation systematically, but first I want to establish the timeline of events that led to this hearing." She presented a clear, factual account of the generator cord theft, including Officer Martinez's report, the serial number documentation, and Patricia's admission that she had entered my shed without permission. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "So we're clear," Rebecca said. "This hearing was called 3 days after Miss Hendricks was given an official warning by the Scottsdale Police Department for theft and breaking and entering. Mr. Norris has not filed charges, but he has every legal right to do so. This hearing appears to be retaliatory in nature." Patricia's face flushed red. "That's absurd. These violations have been documented over months." "Then why were none of them brought before the board until after the police incident?" Rebecca asked. "According to HOA bylaws, violation notices must be presented to the full board within 30 days of documentation. Yet many of these alleged violations are dated months ago with no corresponding board discussion. That's a violation of procedure by the HOA president herself." Carol Jensen, the treasurer, spoke up. "She's right, Patricia. I don't have any record of these violations being processed through the normal channels. This is the first I'm seeing most of them." Patricia's confidence wavered slightly. "I was gathering comprehensive documentation before bringing them forward." "For 2 years," Rebecca said. "Let's look at the specific allegations. First, the shed color. Mr. Norris, please show the board your documentation." I stood and distributed copies of my contractor's invoice, showing that my shed had been painted in Desert Tan number 47, the exact color specified in the HOA guidelines. I also showed photographs of the paint can with the color code clearly visible and a receipt from the paint store. "The shed is compliant," Rebecca said. "Next allegation, landscaping. Mr. Norris has xeriscaping performed by Desert Dreams Landscaping, a company that specializes in HOA-compliant water-efficient designs. Here's their certification, their license, and photographs showing full compliance with both HOA standards and city water conservation requirements." We went through each allegation methodically. The vehicle parking claim was nonsense because HOA rules allowed commercial vehicles under a certain size to park in residents' driveways, and my work truck was well under that limit. The outdoor lighting met all specifications for both brightness and shielding. The mailbox was at the exact height specified in the guidelines, which I proved with a measuring tape and photographs. The house numbers were in a font that was explicitly listed as acceptable in the HOA documents. Every single violation was either completely false or based on Patricia's misinterpretation or deliberate distortion of the rules. By the time we finished, Patricia was gripping the edge of the table so hard her fingers were white, but Rebecca was not done. "Now, I'd like to call several residents to speak about their experiences with Miss Hendricks' approach to HOA enforcement." Bill Thompson went first, describing how Patricia had tried to fine him for solar panels even though the state of Arizona has specific laws protecting residents' rights to install solar energy systems. She had only backed down when he threatened to report her to the state attorney general's office. Sharon Mitchell talked about receiving violation notices for minor issues like a garden hose being visible from the street, or her trash cans being placed out 12 hours before the designated time, instead of the required 6 hours. She had been fined over $2,000 in the past year alone. Tom Chen described Patricia's threat to place a lien on his house over a broken garage door, something that did not even rise to the level of an HOA violation under the bylaws. One by one, residents came forward with stories of petty harassment, selective enforcement, and Patricia's vindictive behavior toward anyone who questioned her authority. By the time the last witness finished, the mood in the room had shifted dramatically. Even Frank Morrison, usually Patricia's most reliable supporter, looked troubled. Then Rebecca dropped her final bomb. "Miss Jensen, as treasurer, can you tell the board how much the HOA has spent on legal fees in the past 2 years? Carol Jensen looked uncomfortable but determined. "Approximately $78,000. A collective gasp went through the room. That was a staggering amount for a neighborhood of only 85 homes. And how much of that was spent on disputes initiated by Miss Hendricks against individual residents?" Rebecca asked. "Nearly all of it, maybe 90%. Have any of those disputes resulted in successful enforcement actions or recovered fines?" Carol shook her head. "No. In almost every case, either the violations were dismissed, or the residents successfully challenged them, or the HOA had to settle and drop the matter. So Miss Hendricks has spent almost $70,000 of HOA funds pursuing personal vendettas against residents, with no benefit to the community and no recovered costs." "That appears to be the case, yes." The room erupted in angry voices. Residents were on their feet, demanding explanations, calling for Patricia's resignation. Frank Morrison was banging his gavel trying to restore order, but it took several minutes before people calmed down enough to continue. Rebecca remained standing, calm in the center of the storm. "The HOA bylaws are clear. Board members have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of the community. Miss Hendricks has violated that duty repeatedly. She has used HOA funds as her personal legal war chest to harass residents she personally dislikes. She has violated procedures, filed false violation notices, and most seriously, committed actual crimes by breaking into Mr. Norris's shed and stealing his property. The board has a legal obligation to address this." Patricia stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. "This is a witch hunt. I have done everything according to the rules and regulations. These people are just upset because I actually enforce standards instead of letting this neighborhood fall into chaos. You broke into my shed and stole my property," I said quietly. "The police confirmed it was theft. Everything else is just you trying to justify that. I was enforcing HOA regulations. You were committing a crime," Rebecca said flatly. "And now you're trying to use your position to retaliate against Mr. Norris for not letting you get away with it. That's abuse of power and it needs to stop." Frank Morrison looked around at his fellow board members. Jennifer Walsh nodded firmly. David Park, who had been silent all evening, finally spoke up. "Patricia, I think you need to step down. This has gone too far." "I will not step down. I was elected to this position." "Then we'll hold a vote of no confidence," Carol Jensen said. "According to our bylaws, the board can remove an officer with a 2/3 vote." "You can't do that." "Actually, we can," Frank said quietly. He looked tired and older than he had at the start of the meeting. "I make a motion to hold an immediate vote of no confidence in Patricia Hendricks as HOA president." "I second," Carol said. The vote was 4-1, with only Patricia voting against. She was removed as president effective immediately. But the drama was not over yet. As people began to file out of the community center, still buzzing with shock and excitement, Patricia cornered me near the exit. Her face was twisted with rage, all pretense of composure gone. "This is your fault," she hissed. "I'm going to sue you for everything you have. I'm going to make your life a living nightmare." "You already tried that," I said calmly. "It didn't work out so well for you. That cord was community property. You had no right to it." "It was my property, purchased with my money, stored on my land. You stole it, and the serial number proved it." "Serial number," she spat the words like a curse. "You're so smug about that, like you're some kind of genius for registering a stupid cord." I learned from experience. "You've been harassing me for 2 years. I started documenting everything and taking precautions. The serial number was just common sense." "I should have destroyed it," Patricia said, her voice dropping to something almost like a whisper. "I should have cut it into pieces and thrown it away. Then it would have been your word against mine." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You're admitting you stole it intentionally, not for HOA enforcement. You stole it to hurt me." Patricia seemed to realize what she had said. Her eyes widened slightly and she stepped back. "I didn't mean that." But several people had heard her, including Rebecca Singh and Bill Thompson. Rebecca pulled out her phone. "That was a confession to theft with malicious intent. That elevates the charges significantly." Patricia turned and rushed out of the community center, her heels clicking frantically on the tile floor. I watched her go, feeling not triumph but a kind of weary sadness. This was my neighbor, someone I had to live near for the foreseeable future. This should have never escalated to this point. But Rebecca was already on her phone with Officer Martinez, reporting Patricia's confession. Things were about to get much more serious. The next morning, I was getting ready for work when I saw 2 Scottsdale police cruisers pull up to Patricia's house across the street. Officer Martinez and another officer approached the door. I could not hear what was said, but after a few minutes, Patricia emerged in handcuffs. She was crying, her face blotchy and red, her perfectly styled hair disheveled. She looked over at my house as they led her to the police car, and the hatred in her eyes was intense enough to feel physical. I learned later that she was charged with theft, trespassing, and filing a false police report. The false report charge came from her claim that I had threatened her, which Officer Martinez's body camera footage proved was completely fabricated. With multiple witnesses to her confession the night before, the prosecutor felt confident about getting a conviction. But the legal system moved slowly, and life in Sunset Ridge had to continue in the meantime. Patricia was released on bail the same day, and while she was barred from participating in HOA activities pending the board's investigation into financial mismanagement, she still lived in the neighborhood. I saw her occasionally, usually from a distance. She would glare at me but never approached or spoke. The HOA board, now under Frank Morrison's leadership as interim president, hired a forensic accountant to review the finances. What they found was shocking even to those of us who had suspected mismanagement. Patricia had not just wasted money on frivolous legal disputes. She had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, dinners at expensive restaurants charged as board meetings, shopping trips recorded as office supply purchases, even a weekend vacation to San Diego that she had claimed was for an HOA management conference that did not exist. The total misappropriation was over $35,000 across 4 years. The board filed a civil suit to recover the funds, and the criminal prosecutor added embezzlement charges to Patricia's growing legal problems. 3 months after the generator cord incident, I was sitting in my backyard on a Saturday morning, drinking coffee and watching hawks circle over the desert beyond my property line. My phone rang. It was Rebecca Singh. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. "Patricia took a plea deal. She's pleading guilty to theft, embezzlement, and filing a false report. The sentencing hearing is in 2 weeks." "What kind of sentence is she looking at?" "Probably 3 to 5 years, but they'll likely suspend most of it if she pays full restitution and completes probation. She'll have a felony record, though, and she has to pay back everything she took from the HOA, plus your legal fees, plus a penalty fine." "How much is that?" "North of $80,000 total. It's going to bankrupt her." I should have felt satisfied. Justice was being served. Patricia was facing real consequences for her actions. But mostly, I just felt tired. What happens to her house? She'll probably have to sell it. Can't afford the mortgage and the restitution payments. I heard her husband filed for divorce too. Apparently this was the last straw in an already troubled marriage. After we hung up, I sat for a long time thinking about how a $350 generator cord had unraveled someone's entire life. But that was not really accurate. The cord had not destroyed Patricia's life. Her own choices had. The theft, the harassment, the embezzlement, the lies, all of it had been building for years. The generator cord had just been the thing that finally brought it all into the light. Bill Thompson came over later that afternoon with a 6-pack of beer. We sat on my back porch and talked about the changes in the neighborhood. A special election had been held, and Jennifer Walsh was now HOA president. She had immediately implemented new oversight procedures, transparency requirements, and a complete revision of the enforcement policies. Residents could now challenge violations before a neutral review committee instead of facing the president's unilateral authority. "You know what the funny thing is," Bill said, looking out at the darkening sky. "Patricia could have been a good HOA president. The neighborhood does need standards and maintenance, but she turned it into this power trip and it destroyed her." "She saw herself as protecting the neighborhood," I said. In her mind, she was the only thing standing between Sunset Ridge and chaos. Anyone who questioned her was an enemy. "Still can't believe she broke into your shed over a generator cord." "She was looking for a reason," I said. "Any reason to come after me. The cord was just convenient. If it had not been that, it would have been something else eventually. Lucky you registered that serial number." Lucky I learned to protect myself. After the trash confines and the tree height complaints, I started documenting everything, photographing everything, keeping receipts and records for every single thing related to my property. The serial number was just part of that. Bill raised his beer. "To serial numbers and paper trails." I clinked my bottle against his. "To standing up to bullies." The sentencing hearing came on a Tuesday morning. I took the day off work to attend. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal. Patricia sat at the defendant's table with her lawyer, wearing a conservative gray dress that made her look diminished somehow. She had lost weight since I had last seen her, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup could not quite hide. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Margaret Reeves, reviewed the case details and the plea agreement. Then she asked Patricia if she had anything to say. Patricia stood, her hands clasped in front of her. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I want to apologize to Mr. Norris and to the residents of Sunset Ridge. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, that I was protecting our community and maintaining standards, but I lost perspective. I let my position go to my head and I hurt people. I'm deeply sorry for my actions." It sounded rehearsed, and I was not sure how much of it she actually meant. But there was something broken in her posture, a defeat that suggested she understood, at least on some level, how far she had fallen. Judge Reeves was not particularly impressed. "Miss Hendricks, you held a position of trust in your community, and you abused it repeatedly and systematically. You stole from your neighbors. You harassed them. You misused their money for your personal benefit. And when you were caught, you tried to lie your way out of it and retaliate against your victims. The only reason you're not going to prison for the maximum sentence is because you've agreed to pay full restitution and have no prior criminal record." She sentenced Patricia to 5 years, suspended to 18 months of house arrest followed by 3 years of probation. Patricia would have to wear an ankle monitor, could only leave her home for approved work and medical appointments, and had to complete 200 hours of community service. She also had to pay back every penny she had taken, plus interest, plus my legal fees and those of the HOA, plus court costs and fines. The total came to just over $92,000. Patricia's house went on the market 3 weeks later. I watched the realtor plant the sign in her front yard, and I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that the nightmare was over, sadness that it had come to this, and a lingering unease about what might have happened if I had not registered that serial number, if I had not been able to prove the cord was mine. A young couple with 2 small children bought Patricia's house in August. They were friendly and normal, and they had no interest in HOA politics. They just wanted a nice place to raise their kids in a good school district. I helped them move in, carrying boxes and offering advice about living in the Arizona heat. Frank Morrison stepped down as interim president after Jennifer Walsh's election was confirmed, citing a desire to spend more time on his consulting business. Carol Jensen remained as treasurer, but with new oversight requirements and transparency measures. The HOA board meetings became boring affairs focused on actual maintenance issues and budgets, rather than personal vendettas and power struggles. Life in Sunset Ridge returned to normal, or at least to what normal should have been all along. People maintained their properties because they took pride in their homes, not because they feared harassment from an authoritarian board president. Violations were handled through reasonable discussions and agreed upon timelines rather than threats and fines. The neighborhood thrived in the way communities are supposed to thrive, with people actually talking to each other and helping each other instead of living in fear of their neighbors. I kept the generator cord in my shed, coiled neatly on its designated shelf. Every time I looked at it, I was reminded of how something so simple and ordinary had catalyzed such dramatic change. The serial number tag was still attached, the metal slightly tarnished now, but the numbers clearly visible. PL 8847 2294 HG. Those numbers had been the proof that turned the tide, the evidence that could not be disputed or dismissed. Marcus, my security consultant friend, started recommending to his clients that they register serial numbers for all their valuable equipment and tools. "You never know when you might need to prove ownership," he would say. "Stephen's situation is not as unique as you'd think. People steal stuff and claim it's theirs all the time. Serial numbers don't lie." I sometimes wondered what Patricia was doing with her days, confined to her house with the ankle monitor tracking her every movement. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had gotten a remote job doing data entry, trying to earn money to pay off her restitution. Her ex-husband had moved to Texas with their adult son, leaving her completely alone. Some people felt sorry for her. Others thought she got exactly what she deserved. I tried not to think about it too much. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. I had my own life to focus on, my own work and hobbies and relationships. One evening, about 6 months after the sentencing, I was working in my front yard trimming the desert plants that lined my walkway when a car pulled up. It was an older sedan I did not recognize. The driver's door opened and Patricia stepped out. She looked different. Thinner, older, tired. She was wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt, nothing like the designer clothes she used to favor. The ankle monitor was visible above her sneaker, a black plastic band that marked her status as a convicted criminal. "Stephen," she said, stopping at the end of my driveway. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I set down my pruning shears and wiped my hands on my jeans. "What do you want, Patricia?" "I'm not supposed to be here," she said. "I got permission from my probation officer to drive to the grocery store, but I'm not supposed to make any stops. I just needed to say something to you." "Okay." She took a deep breath. "I was wrong about everything. The way I treated you, the way I treated everyone in the neighborhood. I convinced myself I was important, that being HOA president meant I had real power and authority. And I used that to bully people because it made me feel significant. I'm sorry." It was the most genuine thing I had ever heard her say. No rehearsed speech, no lawyer-approved statement, just raw honesty from someone who had lost everything and was trying to find some small piece of redemption. "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully. "That generator cord," Patricia continued, and she actually laughed, though it was a bitter sound. "If I had known it had a serial number, I never would have taken it. I thought it would be my word against yours and everyone would believe the HOA president over some random resident. I was so arrogant. The serial number was not the real problem," I said. "The real problem was that you thought you had the right to break into my shed and take my property in the first place. Serial number or not, that was theft. I know that now. I didn't then. Or maybe I did and just did not care." She looked down at the ankle monitor on her leg. "This is what caring looks like, I guess, having to face what you've done and live with it every single day. Are you paying back the restitution? Some of it?" "It'll take years to pay it all back, but I'm trying. I got the job. I'm making payments. My credit is destroyed. I'm going to be a convicted felon for the rest of my life, and I'll never be able to work in any kind of management or financial role again. But I'm trying to do the right thing now, even though it's way too late." We stood in awkward silence for a moment. I did not know what she wanted from me. Forgiveness, absolution, some kind of acknowledgement that she was trying to change. "I hope things work out for you," I finally said. It was not exactly forgiveness, but it was not hostility either. Just a neutral acknowledgement that we were both human beings trying to navigate a difficult situation. Patricia nodded. "I should go. I'm probably already pushing my luck by stopping here. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did was wrong, and I'm sorry." She got back in her car and drove away. I watched her go, then picked up my pruning shears and went back to work on my landscaping. The interaction had been strange and uncomfortable, but also somehow necessary. Maybe Patricia really was trying to change. Maybe she would spend the rest of her life paying for her mistakes and trying to become a better person. Or maybe the apology was just another manipulation, another attempt to control the narrative. I would probably never know for sure, and that was okay. It was not my job to redeem Patricia Hendricks or to judge whether her repentance was genuine. My job was to live my life, maintain my property, and be a good neighbor to the people around me. The monsoon season came with its dramatic thunderstorms and flooding rains. My backup generator sat ready in the shed, and my heavy-duty extension cord with its registered serial number was coiled beside it, waiting to be useful. We had 2 power outages that summer, and both times my generator kept my refrigerator running and my air conditioning working. The cord performed flawlessly, exactly as it was designed to do. Bill Thompson joked that it was the most expensive extension cord in Arizona, considering everything it had cost Patricia. But to me, it was just a tool, an object with a specific purpose. The fact that it had also served as the catalyst for exposing corruption and abuse of power was almost incidental. The HOA held its annual meeting in October, and I attended along with most of the neighborhood. Jennifer Walsh presented a complete financial report, now audited and transparent. The legal fees had dropped to almost nothing. The reserve fund was growing. Maintenance projects that had been delayed for years were finally being completed. The community was functioning the way it should have been all along. During the open comment period, Sharon Mitchell stood up and thanked me publicly for standing up to Patricia. Several other residents joined in, turning it into an impromptu round of applause. I felt my face heat with embarrassment, but I also felt something else. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction. I had stood up for myself and for my neighbors, and it had made a real difference. After the meeting, Jennifer Walsh pulled me aside. "Have you thought about joining the board?" she asked. "We have an open position and you'd be great at it," I laughed. "After everything I just went through, you think I want to get involved in HOA politics?" "Not politics. Actual community management, making sure we maintain our property values and neighborhood standards without treating people like criminals. You understand what went wrong and why. That makes you valuable." I thought about it for a moment. The old me, the me from before the generator cord incident, would have immediately said no. Too much hassle, too much drama, too much risk of getting sucked into exactly the kind of petty power struggles that had destroyed Patricia. But I had learned something through this whole experience. Communities need good people willing to do the boring, thankless work of actual governance. If people like me refuse to get involved because it is too much trouble, then people like Patricia fill the vacuum, and then everyone suffers. "Let me think about it," I said. "I'm not promising anything, but I'll consider it." Jennifer nodded, satisfied. "That's all I'm asking." Over the next few weeks, I talked to Rebecca Singh about the legal implications of board service, to Bill Thompson about his experiences as a board member in his previous neighborhood, and to Carol Jensen about what the actual responsibilities entailed. It was not as scary as I had thought. Most of the work was routine administration, reviewing maintenance bids, approving reasonable expenditures, and occasionally mediating disputes between neighbors. I agreed to fill the open position on a trial basis through the end of the current term. If I hated it, I could step down when elections came around again in 6 months. If I found it manageable, maybe I would run for a full term. My first board meeting as a member was surprisingly pleasant. We discussed repainting the community center, approved a new landscaping contract for the common areas, and reviewed the budget projections for the next quarter. No drama, no power struggles, no vindictive enforcement actions. Just 5 neighbors working together to maintain the community we all lived in. It was, I realized, what Patricia could have had if she had been willing to let go of her need for control and dominance. She could have been respected and appreciated for genuinely serving her community. Instead, she had turned the HOA into her personal kingdom and herself into a petty tyrant, and it had cost her everything. The winter holidays came and went. I saw Patricia once more, in early January, walking from her car to her front door carrying grocery bags. She looked up and saw me checking my mailbox across the street. For a moment our eyes met. She nodded slightly and I nodded back. No words were exchanged. There was nothing left to say. Her house had not sold after all. The real estate market had shifted, and she had pulled it off the market rather than take a loss. So she was still my neighbor, still living across the street, still serving out her house arrest sentence. We would probably see each other occasionally for years to come, these awkward encounters between two people whose lives had become entangled in the worst possible way. But I could live with that. I had learned to document everything, to protect myself, and to stand up when necessary. I had learned that serial numbers and paper trails mattered, that evidence trumped accusations, and that bullies eventually faced consequences if enough people were willing to resist them. Most importantly, I had learned that objects, even simple things like a generator extension cord, could have significance far beyond their intended purpose. That cord had cost me $350 at Home Depot. It had led to theft charges, embezzlement revelations, an HOA revolution, and a woman's complete downfall. All because it had a registered serial number that proved ownership beyond any dispute. I still used it whenever the power went out. It worked perfectly every time, reliable and sturdy, exactly as advertised. And every time I plugged it in, I remembered the lesson it had taught me. Protect yourself, document everything, and never underestimate the power of being able to prove the truth when someone tries to lie. The monsoon season came around again, and with it, the annual ritual of preparing for power outages and storm damage. I checked my generator, changed the oil, tested the fuel system. I examined my extension cord carefully, making sure the insulation was intact and the connectors were clean. And I took a photograph of the serial number tag, adding it to my digital files alongside all the other documentation I maintained about my property. PL 8847 2294 HG. Those numbers had changed my life and my neighborhood. They had exposed corruption, ended harassment, and brought justice to people who had been suffering under tyranny for years. All because I had taken 5 minutes to register a serial number with the manufacturer when I made the purchase. It seemed like such a small thing. But sometimes small things make all the difference. Jennifer Walsh proved to be an excellent HOA president, and under her leadership, Sunset Ridge transformed into the kind of community people actually wanted to live in. Property values increased. Neighbors became friends again. The constant tension and fear that had characterized Patricia's reign disappeared, replaced by a sense of genuine community. I served out my trial term on the board and decided to run for a full term in the spring elections. To my surprise, I won easily. Apparently, my role in the Patricia situation had given me credibility and trust among my neighbors. They knew I would not abuse my position, that I understood the difference between reasonable governance and authoritarian control. Bill Thompson was elected to the board as well, and together, we worked with Jennifer to create new policies that balanced community standards with individual rights. We implemented clear appeal processes, established oversight committees, and created transparency requirements that made it impossible for any one person to abuse their position the way Patricia had. The forensic accountant's final report on HOA finances revealed the full extent of Patricia's mismanagement. The civil suit recovered some of the money, though not all of it. Patricia was making her court-ordered restitution payments, but at the rate she was going, she would be paying for the next decade. Her sentence included provisions that any windfall or increase in income had to go toward accelerating the payments. She was essentially indentured to the community she had once tried to rule. I sometimes wondered if she regretted what she had done, or if she just regretted getting caught. Her apology in my driveway had seemed genuine, but people were complicated. Maybe she felt both real remorse and real resentment, existing side by side. Maybe she understood her mistakes intellectually while still feeling emotionally that she had been treated unfairly. It did not really matter. What mattered was that the situation was resolved. Justice had been served as well as it could be, and the community had moved forward. Patricia's story had become a cautionary tale told at HOA conferences and management seminars throughout Arizona. Rebecca Singh used it as a case study in her presentations about board governance and fiduciary duty. The registered serial number became a symbol of the importance of documentation and evidence in property disputes. My life returned to something approaching normal, though I was more aware now of the systems and structures that governed community living. I paid attention to HOA politics, not because I was looking for drama, but because I understood that good governance required engaged citizens. Apathy and indifference created vacuums that people like Patricia filled with their own agendas. The generator cord remained in my shed, stored carefully and maintained properly. It was just a tool, doing its job when needed, but it would always represent more than that to me. It was a reminder that standing up to injustice mattered, that documentation and evidence were powerful weapons against lies and manipulation, and that sometimes the smallest details, like a serial number stamped on a metal tag, could change everything. 2 years after the incident, I ran into Officer Martinez at a community safety meeting. She was giving a presentation about property crime prevention, and she used my case as an example of why people should register serial numbers for their valuable items. Documentation saves cases, she told the assembled residents. When Mr. Norris could prove that cord was his with registration papers and a matching serial number, it turned, he said she said dispute into an open and shut theft case. That documentation led to the discovery of much larger crimes and resulted in justice for an entire community. After her presentation, she came over to talk to me. "How are things in Sunset Ridge these days?" she asked. "Much better. We have a functional HOA board now, actual governance instead of dictatorship. No one lives in fear of their neighbors anymore." "That's good to hear. Your case made an impression on me. I deal with a lot of HOA disputes, and most of them are just petty nonsense that wastes everyone's time. But yours was different. It was real crime hiding behind the facade of community enforcement. Do you run into that a lot? More than you would think. Power corrupts, even small-scale power like an HOA board position. People get a little authority and they think they're above the law. They need to be reminded that they are not." I thought about Patricia, about how her need for control and significance had led her to cross lines she should never have crossed, about how she had mistaken her position for actual authority, her title for real power, and about how a simple extension cord with a registered serial number had been her undoing. "She destroyed her own life," I said. "I just documented what she did." Officer Martinez nodded. "That's usually how it works. The documentation does not create the crime. It just makes the crime visible and provable. You did the right thing by protecting yourself and standing up when she crossed the line." As I drove home that evening, I thought about all the people who do not protect themselves, who do not document things, who do not stand up when they are wronged. How many of them suffer in silence because they cannot prove what happened? How many Patricia Hendricks are out there, getting away with harassment and theft and abuse of power because their victims cannot fight back effectively? The answer was probably too many. But maybe my story would help change that. Maybe other people would learn to document their property, to register serial numbers, to keep records and take photographs. Maybe they would understand that standing up to bullies was worth the effort, that justice was possible even when it seemed hopeless. I pulled into my driveway in Sunset Ridge and looked around at the quiet neighborhood. Porch lights were coming on as evening fell. Families were sitting down to dinner. Kids were playing in yards. It was peaceful and normal, the way it should always have been. And in my shed, carefully stored and maintained, was a bright orange extension cord with a registered serial number that had made all the difference.